Everyone. So welcome to the Kubernetes series that we have started on YouTube. So in today's session, we are going to discuss about the config map. Okay. And what is config map? What are the types of config maps we can use with an example? Also how config map works in the Kubernetes architecture, right? So everything we will discuss in detail, right? So let's get started with what is config map. Okay, so as the definition reads here, so config map is an API object in Kubernetes, right? So it is an you can say it is an API object in the Kubernetes that is used to store, this is important, non-confidential configuration data, right? So config map always stores the non-confidential configuration data. You should not store any secret or confidential information inside the config map files. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing is it is in key value pair. Okay, so it works in key value pair. Say for example, when I say key value pair means it will be like just if you take this example, right? If you take this example, so language equals to English, temperature equals to Celsius, location equals to Hyderabad. Same here, language equals to French, temperature equals to Fahrenheit, and location equal to friends. So this is called key value pair, right? So config map stores the data into key value pair kind of thing, right? So this is like you have to manage your configuration file in your application. You basically you can manage, right? So what it does is, so if you wanted to decouple your configurations from the container image, okay, and you wanted to make your application more portable and friendly to any users or team or dev team or operations team, anybody, right? So or so that will be or the, whoever is deploying that application, there it is going to give you more flexibility, right? Let's understand this use case with example also. So consider there is an application here, okay, and that application you can consider as a Docker image, okay. So if your application is there and it is deployed on the app store, okay. So this app store, let's say this app is or this application tells you about the weather information, okay. So in Hyderabad, if you see location Hyderabad, temperature people are preferring as Celsius, language they are preferring as English, okay. So this is what they are preferring. So user will use this config map file and they will install this or they will work with this application. Whereas in France, people are people are going to prefer like okay they wanted to see the temperature and the application in Fahrenheit, and the location is or the language they wanted to see of that the app is or application is in the French, right? So this is what the config map is going to do, right? Without building the application, you can create config maps, and those config maps will have key value pair. Based on that, application can be utilized. Okay, so what it is mentioned here, users from the different countries use the same app without rebuilding the application or image. Okay, so this is what is all about the config map. This is by the example, right? And how many types of config map we have? So there are four types of config map. First one is literal key value pair. Okay, from the file we can create config map. From directory also we can create a config map. So basically there will be one folder, inside that multiple files will be there, and those files will work as a key value pair. Okay, so sorry. So this is another approach, and then there is a YAML manifest file. So these are the different three, four kinds of config map you can create in your system, right? So why I'm saying it is an API object? So it stores the data in a key value pair that we have already discussed, and it is this data, right? Whatever this is getting stored, it is going to be stored in your etcd. Okay, this is important, that the data or the configuration data which you are storing, right, it is going and it is present into the etcd. Whenever you create a config map file, the data will be stored or key value pair will be stored into the etcd. Okay, and another important thing I just wanted to tell, I think it is missed here, but for each namespace there will be one config file, right? So you have to just remember this point. For each namespace, I think I can write it. So So here for each team space, there will be one single config map or CM, right? So this is what one point was missing. I just added. Okay. Now let's see what is the next point. So since we are storing the data into the etcd, right, or the config map key value pair into the etcd, the etcd is accessible to everyone, right? I mean, the large number of people in your organization will have the access. So that is why you should not store the no, I mean, you should only store the non-confidential, or you should not store the confidential information. Okay, never store the confidential information into the config map file, because it is ultimately going to store those key value pair into etcd, and etcd, your team or your organization people can access us with limited access basically. Okay, if they have a limited access, they can they can just log in into this etcd pod. This is nothing but it's a pod already, right, which maintains the current and desired state of the pod. So that information, it also stores config map. So people can just reach or go inside this etcd and they can access this pod or your secrets. Okay. Another problem, we should not store here any uh, secrets or confidential information, is because if you are storing it here, right, there is no, technically there is nothing going to break, right? So I've mentioned, yes, technically nothing is going to be break, but if you are storing a secret here, but that's not a good practice as for your organization or as an Azure DevOps team. This is not a good practice, or DevOps team, right? It's not definitely a good practice to store secrets into the etcd. Okay, so if you are storing, still if you wanted to store, you can store it, but the problem with this approach will be need to manage a large number of people of your organization with RBAC rule based access control. Okay, so you have to ensure like who has to view it, who can delete it, who can edit, remove. So those all permission wise you have to check on a large number of people, right? So that is why we should not use map for confidential information. Rather, you should go for the secret that we will cover in the next topic, right? So this is the main thing which we have discussed, this example and the types of config map we have seen. Now let's see how it actually works when you will work with the architecture. Okay, so let's say you are creating any pod, or you are creating any, you have written either by the declarative or imperative way, you have created a config map file, right? So let's say if you are creating, when you hit enter or when you apply, right? So what immediately it does is it sends the request to API server, and API servers stores the config map information, key value pair information into the etcd immediately, right? So let's say it got saved into the etcd in step one, right? Once the config map is created, then if you are applying or creating a pod or deployment, then spec of that spec of that particular pod or deployment gets stored into the etcd by use of API server, right? So this is two things happening. This is when you are creating it, right? When you create or apply it, and when it is about to run, when the container is about to run inside the pod, what happens is kubelet asks immediately, hey, my pod is about to run and it is going to be started soon. Can you give me, because it is inside the pod or deployment, right? You are going to refer your config map. Okay, I will show you just quickly in a few minutes. So you are going to refer into the config. So here when it is going to start, right, it will immediately ask like, hey guys, for this pod to start, there is some config map is referenced. So where is that information? So kubelet will immediately ask this to etcd, API server. API server will read this information from etcd and send it back to the kubelet, and kubelet will directly inject that information of the environment variables or volumes into the container, right? That helps immediately to start the container or pod. Okay, so that's the concept of uh, config maps. Okay, now let's get into the demo as well. So I will open my file. Okay, so if you can see, this is my directory where I have created already all the files. Let's open. my Visual Studio. Okay, let it open. Okay, so meanwhile it will open. What I will do is I am going to demo first this file, right? Deployment with config YAML. So let me apply it right away, and then we will go and discuss kubectl apply -f, and then I will mention my file name is deployment with config map, right? I will hit enter and it should start deploying my resources. Okay, so now let's see. Meanwhile, it is going to create all those resources. Let's see what is inside this file and understand the config map. Okay, so this is the file which I have deployed. So in this file, what you see is there is one namespace is there for dev namespace, then there is a QA namespace, and then there is a prod namespace, right? So there are three namespaces. As we discussed, for each namespace, there can be only one config map, right? So, so this is the config map I have created here. So if you see, when we create a config map, right, the API version will be v1 and kind will be config map. Okay, metadata you can pass the name of that config map, what you wanted to give it. So I'm giving it app hyphen config. Okay, let's quickly check whether it started deploying or not. Okay, so it is creating. Let it create. We will come back. So it is created as well. Okay, let's discuss this one. So, okay, so where were we? We were here. So I have given the name of my config map file as app config, and I have mentioned that I need it to be in dev namespace. Okay, then here I am mentioning some variables, environment variables. As app name, I want is this is my app name. This is log level I'm mentioning as debug. DB host is this and port number is this. So anything you can mention and n number of key values pair. So what is this? This is a key value pair. So first I'm declaring the config map, and this is how I will write the config map values in key value pairs. Okay, so data is key and this is the value, key value, key value. Okay, so it can extend. So same is for QA, nothing much. So this is just I have mentioned that okay, this is for namespace QA and this is for prod namespace. Okay, so this is how you will create the config map. And now let's see, when after creating a config map, right, how you will reference into your deployment, right? So this is the first deployment. Okay, so as we know that API version for deployment is apps/v1. So and the kind is deployment. Okay, replicas I'm keeping as one, so I need always one pod to be available in my system. This is the name of my deployment, and I'm creating into the dev namespace. This is the match labels and label I have provided. That is fine. Okay, now under the spec you see. So under the spec, I'm mentioning containers, and the name of my container is web, and image I'm using is Nginx latest. Okay, then this is important. When we have to reference our config file, right? So we have to our uh, config map which we have created. So you have to mention as environment from env from and where you wanted to reference config map reference, and you have to give the name of that config file. Okay, so these 3 points are important. So an env from config map reference, and the name of my config map is app config, right? But you might be thinking, okay, this is the config map I'm referencing here in the deployment, which is okay. But all these config map which we created are of their name is app config and app config, app config. How it will ensure that it has to go for the dev only, because this is for the dev namespace. So as I told, each namespace will have only one config map, and here we are deploying for dev namespace. So only it will pick this data only. It is not going to pick the QA or prod. Okay. So it will only show the app namespace dev. App underscore name is equals to dev. This data it will always show. Okay. So this is what all about. I have just explained this, how you have to reference your config map. Okay. So env from and then config map and the name of that config map reference and the name of that config map. So this is what you have to mention. Okay, so this remaining is for dev and QA and prod. Okay, this is for QA. Dev we have already discussed, QA, and similarly for prod. Okay, so this is the simple structure of our config map file where we are doing literal, right? So just we are mentioning name value, key value like that. Okay, so let's deploy this file. I think it should be deployed by now. I will check it. kubectl get all ns get all pods minus hyphen n and then dev. I think I should not write here. Okay, so you are seeing here, right? So currently the status it is showing as container is currently in creating state. So it seems like we need to wait for a couple of more seconds. Meanwhile, let's go and discuss the another file. Okay, so this is one thing we have discussed, like how you will declare the namespaces, how you will create the config map, okay, and then how you will create the how you will reference the config map. So you can see it is in one file, right? But you can also what you can do is you can create one config map as a separate file. So if you see for the dev we have created same thing, and this is the second part, okay, where you are just referencing it, right? So what it is doing is first, it should create a namespace. Okay, so here it is the namespace, and then after that, it is in that namespace, it is deploying one pod, and it is referencing it to, or then the config map is referencing it to. Okay, it is referencing this particular config app, config name. So this is what we are creating here. Okay, I think it should be ready now. So I will try to show you the demo now. Okay, now it is running. We'll clear it, bring it up. Okay, now it is in running state. So now what we will do is we will log in. We will basically uh, open the file, one of the config file. Say for example, since we have deployed this one already, let's go with this example only. Okay. So what I will do is I will first log into this pod. Okay. So I'll mention kubectl exec hyphen interactive. What is my pod name? This is my pod name. Control C, Control V. I mention my pod name under the namespace of dev. Okay, and then I will print env, and let's print all values. Okay, so when you will print it, it will just show me. So if you see, app name equals to my web app dev. Okay, so it is sending or it is giving me the values from on the dev config map which we have created. Okay, so these are those values. Now what I will do is I will edit this data. Okay, I don't want it to redeploy this complete model again. Okay, what I can do is I can edit it here only. Okay, and I can deploy it. But I wanted to make it more dynamically, and whatever I wanted to change, what I will do is I will just enter command kubectl exec hyphen not exec. Let's edit it and edit it to config config map. You can also write cm. Okay, config map. What is my config map name? App hyphen what was that? Config, right? App config, and what is the name in namespace is in dev. Okay, so it will open one file for me. Okay, it has opened. Now basically this is the file, right? Now what I will do is I will edit something from debug to release and underscore live demo change. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm changing the config map values. Okay, so I'm changing the config map values, this dev. Okay, so I'm changing this data and this data, these two values just for demo, I'm changing it, and I'll control S. And what I will do is control S, and after that, I will close this. Okay, so it will show like it got saved, it got edited, and it got exited. Okay, now let's do one thing. What I will do is I will delete this particular pod under this namespace. Okay, kubectl delete pod, and the pod name is this, right? So once I will delete this pod under the namespace of dev, this got deleted, and immediately what it should happen is it will spin another pod inside the dev namespace. Okay, it should be in creating maybe. Let's check if it has created already. Okay, so it created and it is in running state. Now what we will do is now we will execute this command again. Okay, Control C, Control V. But the pod got changed, right? The latest pod is this one because we deleted and new pod came. So let's replace the pod here in this command and I'll hit enter. So if you see here, we have got the latest value. Earlier it was just dev and it is live demo change. And what else got changed from debug? It got changed to release. Okay, so what we are trying to demo here is we did not rebuild the whole deployment. I just did the edit into the config file, okay, config map file, and then it is picking up the latest one. Okay, so based on my requirement, I'm doing the change and then it is picking up automatically, right? So suppose if this was your case, if you are deploying your live one, so what you need to do is you don't need to even worry about anything. You just deploy these two files and you go ahead and change into this file, and you just have to delete the pod automatically. Whatever you are editing here, the latest one, it will pick, right? So that's how it will work. You this is the what this is the flexibility we get here. And if I have to explain in more generic term, then you remember, right? I mean, if you have done this concept called when you deploy infrastructure using ARM template, so you have two files here. So one is template.json, okay, and another one is parameters.json. Okay, so if you want it to be more dynamic in nature, so you follow this approach. You can also create parameter file, and you can also keep the parameters into the same main template.json. But for more keeping it more dynamic, what we do is we keep one file here, basically template.json, and we keep multiple parameters. So it will be like one will be used for dev, one will be used for QA. This is parameter.json, and it will be used in QA. Okay, and this will be used in prod. So similar kind of thing. So you have one file here, okay, where you keep it as your config map, and this is your main file. So whatever you wanted to change, just based on the namespace, you will change and data will get changed. Okay, so you can keep all the parameters here. So another one again you can copy and you can create another one by just you need to mention here, give another namespace QA. Okay, create another config file. Okay, so you just need to create config file here, and you just need to, you have to mention as Q. Okay, so whatever you will change here, and you just need to deploy or delete the, save it, and just deploy this file. Okay, so then everything is sorted. The latest pod, right? It will pick the data from your changed config map, right? So this is the simple example how you can work with config map. Okay, we have also discussed in this video about, like, okay, we will also discuss three more out there, right? Like literals are there with file and directory. Okay, so there is no more change, much change here. So in the literal, right, you see what is there in the literal. We just, what we do is the same example whatever we have learned. Literal follows the same. So we have to just create a config map, and we have to just key value pair we have to give, and you need to reference this particular config map to your deployment. Okay, so you have to mention it here under your deployment, or whenever if you are creating a pod. So env from config map, and you just have to give the name, okay, of that config map reference. So reference you are giving it to this, right? So this is one thing. Another thing is by files, right? So by files, in files what we do is, here also nothing much different, but you create till here everything is same. Okay, this still here everything is same. So what you do is here environment from config map, and you reference it to the file or the config map which you need to create it. Okay, and that config map will refer it to these data. Okay, so this file will read, and it will read the data from app name equals to this like this. Okay, and third and the last one is config map from directory. Okay, so in the directory what we do, as I told, here we create a namespace called dev. Okay, after that namespace dev, we deploy, let's say you are deploying one pod or two pods in this namespace. Okay, in dev namespace, and you are keeping the you are just naming the name of your deployment as nginx with config map directory example. Okay, and this is all same, should not be different or difficult here to understand. This is here you are under the spec, you are declaring the containers, and under the containers your name of your container, and what is the image you are using, what is volume mount. So this is something different here. So what volume mounts is, it basically it's attach your file on the container. So if you take an example like how you, and when you attach it to the container, right, those files, your container will read and write through those attached file. Okay, so you just take an example like you are using a pen drive into your USB. Okay, and then you can read and write, right? You just mounting it. Okay, you are mounting it. So that's how volume mounts work here. Okay, so you are mounting the config volume, okay, into this particular path. Okay, and the name volume is config volume, and this is the name of that config file. Okay, so if let me demo this part, because this is little tricky to understand as well. So what I will do is, first let me go inside this folder. Okay, so I'll copy this file name. What I will do is, I have to demo this, right? So I will open my files. I will clear everything, and let me delete as well. I should have deleted and created before explaining, but that is fine. Okay, so let it delete everything. It has started deleting. And what other thing I will do is, let it delete. Meanwhile, let me explain it again. Okay, so we are creating a namespace. Okay, and then what we are doing is, we are creating a volume mount here. So in previous all sections, what we have learned here is, we are mentioning as environment from, right? And then we are giving the reference. So if you remember what we are doing previously, so we are giving as environment from and then config map reference we are giving to where is my config reference which we created in that namespace. Okay, it will always check under the same namespace where you are doing the deployment, and every namespace will have only one config map, right? But here we are creating a volume mount and we are giving the path. Okay, so what it is config volume, and we are mentioning is volume path is under the etc, that is a default directory, and under that this is the folder config dir. Okay, so this is my config dir. Under this I am creating three more files. So if you will see, let me deploy our another thing meanwhile. So first I will change cd to this file and kubectl apply -f is the name of folder here, nginx deployment.dir. .dir. Okay, so let it get deployed. Okay, so meanwhile it is deploying. So what we were discussing here, so under this folder, under this path, right? So if you see here, there are three files I have created. One is app name, customer header, and log level. So each file here will work as a, this will work as a key, and value inside this file will work as a pair. So key, this is pair, key value, key, this is value. So key value pair it will work. Okay, so every file will behave as a key and value inside the file will work as a pair, and your application should go ahead and read these files. Okay, that is important here. Your application needs to read all these files. Okay, your application should be designed. So you need to decide it what kind of config map you are going to use in your project. Okay, so let's see by now is it deployed. kubectl get pods dev. Okay, so now you see currently it is in creating state. So we will give just couple of more minutes to get this created. Okay, so let it run. Meanwhile we will see in our file only. Okay, so what we will do is we have created this namespace and we have created the deployment. Now what we need to do is we need to create this config map. So if you see anywhere we are not creating a config map. So in this example what I'm trying to show by imperative way. So this is all called by when you are doing it through YAML file, this is a declarative way. When you need to do it through command, that will be called as imperative way. Okay, so we will use this command. I'm just waiting for that previous thing to get completed. I'll control C and let's go and check if it is ready. kubectl get pod and dev. Okay, it is still creating. I don't know how much time it will take because of internet speed and all. It is taking time, but that is fine. Okay, so we'll quickly test it again. It's still creating. Okay, so meanwhile it is creating. What I will do is let's deploy this as well. Basically, we are creating a namespace with this name. Sorry, we are creating a config map with this name. So kubectl create config map, and the name of my config map from file under this directory we are mentioning. Okay, so config, this is the what the same my folder is there, and on the namespace of dev. Okay, so let's run it and hit enter. Okay, so it got created. I hope it is still create. Okay, so it is taking some minute of time, but that is okay. Okay, so now is it ready? Not sure why it is taking so much of time. Okay, meanwhile, we can revise it quickly. So config map will work as a key value pair. Okay, and where is this config map? This one we have learned, right? So config map will work as a key value pair. Okay, and inside one namespace there will be always one config map, that is point number 2. Okay, and let's discuss meanwhile this architecture as well. So when you apply the kubectl apply or config, you say you when you when you apply the config map, it sends the request to etcd. So in this case, right, what we did just now, we have created this, we did this, right? Kubectl create config map. So when you hit enter, it must have immediately sent the request to API server, and API server should have saved the request or saved the data inside this into the etcd. Okay, when you create the pod, the all the spec information, that is okay, which config map is it referring or not, so those are information immediately get stored here. When it is about to run, kubelet will immediately ask, hey, this is asking for the reference of config map, can you provide me, is it saved with you? So it will share it, yes, it is there with me, it will provide it, it will share it again, and it will create it, right? So this is how it works. Okay, now let's test it. It should be ready. Yeah, it is ready now. So what we will do is so kubectl, we will do exec hyphen it. Okay, nginx, that's the image we are using, and let's take any pod name. Okay, so let's take this pod name. I'll take this pod name. Okay, under which namespace is it, is in under the dev namespace. Okay, then what we will do is hyphen cat. Okay, then etc config hyphen dir, right? Config hyphen dir, and then what is the name? Let's say app underscore name. We wanted to check for app underscore name dot txt, right? If we hit enter, so it is telling like nginx is not found. uh okay, why it is showing as nginx not found? Let's see what image I'm using. Nginx latest only, right? So okay, I made one mistake. We should not mention here the image name. We should directly give the pod name. Okay, let's see. So it is telling like under this directory etc config dir, there is no such file here. Now what it is and why it is telling, is it any command issue? We can quickly check by cat slash etc config dir That's what the folder name I have, right? CUNFIG hyphen dir, that's right. And underscore, okay, maybe it's app hyphen name dot txt. Okay, so it was, I have given it as an on a capital letter, right? Because when you will see, if you remember in the previous example, I have given app name. So, but file name I have given as small. So if you see, it was my command or my application, whatever I'm trying to do, it is reading the file name, and after reading the file name, it is giving the data inside that file name, right? So this is the data, and inside this data, nginx web dir. So whatever you will write, so those all information you can get it. Okay, so I hope you have understood the concept of all these three, and this was important. So I thought, okay, let me give on the directory as well, because that is something little tricky. Other is just simple. It's a key value pair, and you just need to deploy first your namespace, then your file or pod, and then you have to create your config map, and then you just need to reference when you create a pod or when you create a pod or deployment, right? That point of time, you just need to reference it to the reference. You have to give it the reference to the config map which you have created. Okay, that's how we work. So env from config map and name of the config, and you just need to remember every namespace, every single namespace will have only one config map. Okay, so I hope you have liked this video and the concept is clear with all of you. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop a message on the video, or if you want, you can just ping me on the LinkedIn as well. Okay, so thank you for watching my video, and let's continue to learn the Kubernetes. Okay, thank you guys, and please subscribe, share, and like this video. Have a great day.